I'm really happy to be here today. This is my first time in Sofia, and I'm actually loving the experience I'm having at the conference. I would again request you all to give a round of applause to all the organizers, volunteers, and all of you, because this is going great. So yeah, thank you so much. So today I'm going to talk about the topic, making interactions accessible to all our users. Uh, So the agenda will be, we will start with introduction, what is interaction, what is accessibility. Then we will see how our users interact with web and how can we make those interactions accessible for all our users. A bit of introduction about myself. I am based in Amsterdam, and I am a senior front-end developer who is working as front-end consultant. I'm a Google developer expert, Microsoft MVP, Women Tech Makers ambassador, and Cloudinary ambassador. I'm an accessibility advocate, so you will hear me a lot talking about accessibility. If you want to connect, you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Anuradha15 and on Twitter at miracle_404. So let's get started. What is interaction, right? So interaction means there is a point of contact between our users and the interfaces that we build. So user performs some action, and there is a response from the interfaces, from our websites or from our applications. So based upon that, let's think that what are the different ways in which user might interact with web. So can you give me some examples? How do we interact with web? Some examples? When you open a website, what do you do to do something? Yeah, tabbing, clicking. Someone said click, yeah. Scrolling, yes, yes. Okay. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so the most common is clicking, typing. We can type to search something, let's say, hover over something, scroll something, looking at it, and so on, of course. Uh, so yeah, these are the ways in which we interact with the web. So what is accessibility? Accessibility means making resources and services usable by all our users, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. Why is accessibility important, and why are we talking about it? It is important because whatever we build for all our users, and our users can be very diverse. They can have different types of disabilities, and since our users are very diverse, they can have different types of disabilities, hence they interact with web using different assistive technologies. So there are different ways in which users can access the web. There is, of course, mouse. Apart from that, there is keyboard. Some users might just be using keyboard. There are screen readers. There are braille displays, switch, screen magnification, and so on. Like, there are many ways in which users can interact with web, many assistive technologies. And hence, whenever we are building something, we need to think of all these things, all the ways in which our user might be interacting with the web. So let's revisit. How do users interact with web? We did get all the click, scroll, type, hover. What else? Like, what else? Just give me some alternatives. If you don't click, what do you do? Tab. Yeah, tabbing is definitely, yes, tabbing. So basically, you can, if you can't click, you might be using enter or space bar. Tabbing, of course. Escape key, if you have some model or something open, you escape it to get away from that. There are arrow keys, which we use to navigate between different elements. So we are going to see some examples today. I'm going to share the slides later, so don't worry about that. And the code sandbox examples are all fairly simple. They are all on code sandbox. We will start with a scenario, which will be inaccessible, and then we will see how can we fix it, and we can make it accessible for all our users. So first scenario, buttons. Button is such a simple, small component, right? But it is so powerful. Everywhere we have buttons. We can't do a lot without buttons on web, right? You have to buy, you have to log in, you have to sign up. We have to use buttons for that. So let's see some scenarios. So for example, here, I'll just refresh. Yeah, OK. So yeah, we have some buttons. I click on it. I can, yeah. something is happening, definitely not sign up or login, but I just want to show some action. So I'm using mouse, I can use it. So what I'm going to do, let's say some keyboard user is using, they are just using keyboard. So how will they go? They are going to use tab to tab through all the interactive elements. So I'm going to tab. I tabbed again. Do you know where I am? Like, I'm trying to tab multiple times, but I don't know as a user, even you are not able to know where I am currently. Sadly, this is a very common occurrence across our web. When we start using keyboard, we see that not many websites give us the visual feedback of where we are currently. And if I do not know that what is the currently active button, how do I click it, or how do I do action on it, right? So the culprit is one single line of styling called outline none. I mean, maybe just go ahead and whatever you are using, whatever code base you are working in, just try to search. You might find this line there. And if you find it, do go ahead and remove it. And instead go ahead and use something which does not hamper this interaction for users. So we don't have to do much. Like, just remove it, it should be fine. But sometimes you can use some of the properties like offset, color, and width to make it more pretty. And if the designer says that, OK, we want the outline to be more in line with our design system, with our color scheme, so we can go ahead and use these to make it more in line with our design. For example, here now, I do have offset, like it's not removed, and it's not the default blue color, so I just made it green so that it matches with my color scheme. But it is there, and it gives me visual feedback, and my users, so users know that, OK, where they are currently, and they can go ahead and perform their actions. Now, the other thing is, there is something called icon-only button here. So I have just used an icon. It might be some SVG or an image, anything we might be using for these kind of buttons. There may be like add to cart button, plus, minus, delete button, right? Where we just have icon. So it just did not tab to that. So I can still, if I'm using mouse, it's working fine. But when I'm tabbing, it's not going there. Why? Because what happens is that we tend to not use button element for this. We go ahead and use that SVG or a div inside which we have an image, and we put an on-click handler on that. Now, when you use with mouse, it works perfectly fine. OK, it's still clicking, and the events are happening. But if we start using keyboard, we realize that, OK, that is not accessible to our users. Now, this is not a good experience. So whenever we have something which does not look like a button, but it just has a graphical interpretation, in that case also, let's not use any non-semantic HTML. Let's go ahead and use a button and use styling to still make it look like how the design wants it to look like, but still now it is accessible by keyboard, and I can still interact with it using the keyboard. Now, there is another problem with it. So since it's just an image or just an icon, I can still tab on it. What if I start using screen reader? So I'm going to start my voiceover. I'm using Mac, and I'm on Chrome, and I'm using voiceover here. Can you hear?
Button, group.
OK.
Button, group.
So
Login, button.
For other buttons which had text, it let me know that what is the button. So I know that, OK, I have some context what this button does. When I come to this button,
group.
It just says button and group. So let's say I'm just reliant on screen reader to perform all these actions, and I'm trying to interact with this website. I come across this button. I do not know what this button is. So I don't think we should be pressing on anything which we don't know what it does, right? What if it steals my data? What if it takes some money from my card or something? So yeah, I'm not going to press this. But so what can we do whenever we have such kind of just graphical representation, and
Chrome
that
has new window.
Interactive element.
Voiceover off.
So yeah, in that case, we should still be using some sort of text. There is one way of using where we can just write ARIA label on the buttons. We can add ARIA labels, and that will be announced by the user. But sometimes ARIA label might have problems if we are using a translation. Some user is translating, and there is international languages, different types of languages, it might pose some issue. So there is another way in which we can do is we can still have the text in our div, in our DOM. So for example, I have a text. And what I do is I put some styling, and we can visually hide it. So that text is in the DOM, but it is visually hidden. There's a styling which we can use. This can be a common global styling in our code base, where we can write this code. And then we can go ahead and whatever text we want to hide, we can just put a class on it called SR only. So I'm using React for this code base. So I just made a component out of it where it just puts a class around it. And then I just pass that, OK, this is a text I want to be visually hidden, but I do want the screen reader users to know, all the assistive technologies to know that there is this text, and this would announce this to our users. So maybe I need to refresh. Sometimes it doesn't need refresh while I am demoing, but sometimes I need to refresh it every single time.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Sign up. Login. Favorite. Button. Group.
Cool.
VoiceOver off.
So now it lets me know that, OK, there is some text, and we know that what this button does. Now let's go ahead and check links. Links are similar. The rules are similar. If we have just graphical representation for link, for example, we might know that we use LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram icons in our footers. We just use the icons. Most of the times, we just skip the all text for it or the text for it, and so it's not accessible to all of our users. So I just wanted to show you one report here, Web AIM 1 million report. What they do is that they audit top 1 million websites of the world, their home pages, and they list out all the highest errors which come there. And these are all just the automated errors, not necessarily all the errors. So now here, there are two errors, empty links and empty buttons. Mostly, they come from where we just have some graphical representation of the links and buttons, but we do not have any text. So these are necessarily empty for assistive technologies. They do not know what these links do or what these buttons do. And if we see that empty links is a lot, like 50% of the error is a lot, I would say. And nothing has improved much. Like it has been fairly stable in being error. Yeah, like so these are some things which we need to improve on. So yeah, so always push text for these. You can just use visually hidden or just have all text if it's image and so on. The other thing is, sometimes what happens is we have links and we use buttons to create those links on websites. And this is something which I've seen in reality, in the code bases I have worked at. And I know for a fact that we use like these. We use some hack like window.location, and we put the link on on-click handler, or we use some hooks, React hooks, to navigate you to the link. But that is a button. That is not a link. And this happens, let's say, when in design, it's supposed to be a link, but in design, it shows as a button. And the developers end up using button for that. Again, so all of these anchor elements, button elements, these are all semantic HTML, and they all have, obviously, semantics or a meaning attached to it, and a behavior attached to it. So for links, they have some behavior which they default come from. Like, if I right-click on the link, I get some extra functionality. I can open the link in new tab using keyboard presses and so on. If we use a button, and instead, when we wanted to use a link, then those functionalities are taken away from the users. Like if I right-click, I do not get those functionalities. So whenever we are using or deciding on what to use, we might decide with very caution. Now there is lots of discussion on internet about link versus button. When should we use link? When should we use button? So I'm not going to get into details, but one thing which we can use to decide is that if it takes us somewhere, it's navigating us to somewhere, so it should be a link. Or if it's performing some action, it could be a button. Now, there could be more complex scenarios where it's still debatable, but for a fairly simple scenario, this could be something on which we can decide. So yeah, buttons. So what makes it inaccessible? When we do not put outline, or we remove outline from them, or when we use non-semantic HTML for interactive elements, or when we do not have text for icon-only buttons or links, or when we do not use the right semantic HTML. Next scenario is forms. Forms, again, are a very important component, and they are prevalent on web everywhere. So if we want to take some details, or if we want the users to pay for the services, or if we want to sell something, we would use forms everywhere for that to happen, right? So we need to make sure that is accessible, so all the users really go ahead and pay out, they fill out the form and do stuff. So with forms, one of the very basic things, which is again, which comes in this list of error, is missing form input labels. This is again like almost 46%. We end up not properly labeling our form inputs, and that could be inaccessible. So for example, if we use, let's say, just span or div to label, it's not going to label. But even if we use label, and we do not use it properly, it is still not going to label our forms. So if we are using label, so one way we can label is when we are using the input inside the label. In that case, it is going to be labeled properly. But if we are using label and input as two different elements, in that case, we need to connect the label to input using for. And in React, it's HTML for. So we say that, hey, this label is the for this input, and we use the ID to connect these both. In that case, that is going to be accessible for our users. Now, let's say this is a form. Sometimes we have some complex elements, like let's say password, and we have some rules for our password, like 3 or 4 rules when we say that minimum 8 characters must have alphanumeric, 1 uppercase, and so on, right? And we have these details for our user. Now, that is pretty good. But how will that information be relayed to the user who is just using a screen reader? So right now, if I start using a screen reader, it's not going to read it out to me. So if I just start a voiceover.
Voice for first, last name, email, password. Password. Required secure edit text with autofill menu. To open, muting.
So it just told me that it's a password field. OK, I know. But I do not know the extra information which I need. And if there are so many rules, I'm going to fail again and again until I figure out, right? Because if I don't know all the rules, how do I satisfy all the rules? So for that case, there is something called ARIA described by. That is one of the ways in which we can say that, OK, this hint, so this input is described by this area. So go ahead and describe this as well so the user knows. So let me go ahead and demo this as well. I need to refresh, I guess.
Voice form. First name, last name, edit email, edit text, email feed, password. Password. Required secure edit text with autofill menu. Password must be minimum 8 characters. Muting.
Cool. So in this case, the user knows. So they know all the information which they want, and to succeed in filling out this form. So this is very important. One more thing is, let's say, there is an error. Okay. So now there is an error, and there are 2 things here. First is, let's say the error comes from server, and I'm showing an error message, which is dynamically coming in. The second thing here is this password field has error, and I'm just using color to say that, OK, this is the error field. Now, this is, again, a very common scenario when we just rely on colors to show some information to the user. We show the state to the user, red, green, anything. Now, there can be ways in which, like, let's say user has color blindness or something, and they would not be able to understand if we just use colors, what information are we trying to pass on to our users. So we should not just rely on colors, but we can use some text and some icons to let the users know that, OK, this is an error state, this is a success state, and so on. For dynamic messages, here it says error submitting form, please fix the issue. Now, if I use the screen reader, it's not going to announce to the user. So let's say the user came, they filled everything, and they registered, and there is an error feedback which came from the server. How are they going to know that what's the state? Was it success? What is error? They would not know. So for that, what we can do is we can use something called ARIA live reasons. So div or span, whatever, which has the validation message, we can convert it into a live reason. And one thing here is that this element, this div element, should already be in the DOM. It should not be right that we code, the server message comes, and then we create the div, and then we put the message inside. In that case, this will not work. So that div should be already present in the DOM, and we insert and remove that dynamic message. And this is not only for forms, but any kind of dynamic message. So here we say that aria live polite or the role of status, like these two are equivalent to each other. There are 3 different states. By default, it's off. There is, because any div is not live. The other state could be assertive. So the difference is that when you put assertive or alert role, what it says that this is the most important message, so show it right now. So the priority is high, and if a screen reader is reading something else or announcing to the user, it's going to stop everything and announce that message. In case of polite, if something else is being read, it's going to wait, and once that announcement is finished, then it announces this message. So depending upon the priority of the message, we would like to choose between those. But I think most of the cases, polite should work. So we just made it polite. And we refresh. And let me just... Did I mute?
Text with auto email password. Register button. Error submitting form. Please fix the issue and try again. Muting.
Cool. So now, in this case, the message rightfully got announced to our users, so our users know that, OK, whatever is the status. So this is dynamic messages. And so what makes our forms inaccessible if we do not label it, or we do not label it properly, or we only rely on colors for showing the error or success state, or if we do not announce the validation information or the extra information that is linked to that input. Now, the other scenario is dynamic information, which I always show with our form example, because the form messages are one type of dynamic information. But this is a separate section because they can exist even without forms. So we saw the demo. And what makes it inaccessible is if we do not announce it to our assistive technologies. The last section is like, it's just supposed to be any kind of complicated component. If we have any complex component, the interactions should be accessible. I take the example of models, but it could be anything else. So here I want to talk a bit about authoring practices, why ARIA authoring practices. So that's a documentation from W3, World Wide Web Consortium. So here, let's say that we are trying to build a component, and we want to make it accessible, and we want to know that what is the accessible behavior for that component. How do we find that what are the accessible interactions or the behavior? So we can come here, we can search for that pattern, and we can see that what it says, and we can go ahead and test it based upon that. So for example, there are all these different patterns here, and one of the patterns is dialogue or model, right? So there is a model pattern, and we can go ahead and read that what are the different interactions, keyboard interactions required to make our model accessible. And it gives a fairly nice information about it, and we can go ahead and test it. Now, until few months ago, I would say, like, there was not a very good HTML element which we had where we could use dialogue, but a good thing has happened that now HTML has dialogue which works quite well. So thankfully, we do not need to write all the complex logic to make it accessible. So I would say that go ahead and check out the MDN and other websites for the dialogue. It is pretty good. Another shout out to one of my friends, Hide DevReach. He talks a lot about models, and he has a pretty detailed blog as well as talks about models, popovers, dialogues, the difference, and what are the different types of interactions and everything. I think that is a pretty good one, so definitely go ahead and check it out. Also, one thing which I would like to talk about in the complicated or the complex components is that if we come across something where we do not have a semantic HTML, like a native HTML available, and we have to code it, then we can also check for some component libraries and see if they also provide accessibility out of the box, because that is something which we need to go ahead and test about. So for example, there is something called React Aria. They provide some nice hooks, and they have some quite accessible components. This is not sponsored by them. I just found about it, and so I like it. Yeah, nothing is sponsored or something. So yeah, so they have a use dialog as well. Now we don't need it because we have a dialog, but just go ahead and check out all the component libraries. We do have sometimes nice libraries which have accessibility baked in, so we don't need to write anything from scratch. So this was models. I would like to summarize. Okay. So whenever we are creating something, we should always test with all the different scenarios, and we should think for users that they might be interacting with our web in different ways, and let's test for all those different ways. Do not remove focus. Do not remove the outline. So if you have that in your website, please go ahead and check it today and try to use an alternative. But please, please, please do not remove outline. Also, use semantic HTML whenever possible. Like, I think most of the accessibility errors are because we do not end up using a semantic HTML, and we end up writing div and some extra JavaScript on the top of it. So if there is an HTML element for it, use that element, and that is going to take away lots of accessibility issues. Whenever we have any graphical element which we use for the interactive stuff, like buttons or links, do add some sort of text description so the assistive technologies know the alternative for that image, like what it is. If we have dynamic messages and the user should know about it, then they should be announced to the user so that they know about it. So to conclude, always think from accessibility perspective. And I do have some links which you can use further. You can scan the QR code to get the slides, or go to tinyurl.com/A11Y-interactions. Thank you.